Welcome to Typecasting, where we're typing our favorite fictional characters on the Enneagram and taking on pop culture by the numbers.
Long ago, the 9 types lived together in harmony. Then everything changed when the trendy Instagram posts attacked.
Oh my gosh.
That's as far as I got, and then it fell apart, but...
Oh my gosh. I love it. That was so funny. Well, that is your host, Lucas Graydon. And he's the one who convinced me to watch Avatar again. And it's honestly one of the best decisions I have made in the last 5 years. It brought me so much joy. And I'm so glad you did that.
And that's your co-host, Marjana Tumatua. And I believe she can save the world.
Thank you. Well, I was like, I kind of want to be on theme, but I kind of want to be serious because I watched Avatar growing up, as you know. My brothers were like religious watchers, and I watched with them sometimes, and I hadn't watched it since. And you're like, it's not just a kid show, like try it again. And you wanted to talk about it. And so I was like, okay, I'll watch it, because I don't really like watching a ton of, like, TV is not my thing. I'd rather read. So it was really fun to do that and just like indulge myself in it. And I'm so glad.
I'm so glad you did too. I remember. And the funny thing is, this, like, Avatar was one of my first, like, pandemic rewatches. Like, okay, I'm not doing anything, I'm going to watch something. And so I got to Avatar over a year ago now, probably, when I was doing my rewatch. And so I was like, you need to watch it so that we can talk about it. And we haven't really talked about it because we knew we wanted to do it for the podcast. True. And we loved it so much that we wanted to save it for like a big finale. But also, I'm like, it feels so overdue to finally be talking about it. I'm very excited.
Exactly. Okay, wait. So should we give our announcements then? We kind of went out of order.
We mentioned it last week, and it is official. Next week is the season 2 finale of Typecasting.
I know. I cannot believe it. Just talking about the pandemic. I mean, this was our pandemic project, and we were like, we've talked about it for so long. We had a couple of rewrites, gone back to the writing room, and we did it. And it's just like, I'm so impressed with us that we finished season 2, and we've decided what we're doing for season 3. We're not going to say what it is, but our series premiere is going to be on our season premiere is going to be on August 3rd. So we'll see you guys there.
So we are just taking a quick break, just a couple weeks. We will see you right at the beginning of August for season 3. I'm so excited.
It'll be so fun. Well, let's dive in. My first question for you today, Lucas, is of which element do you feel like you belong?
This was my existential question the entire time I was watching, and you may know this about me, listeners. You may not. I know Marjana too. You know this. I have this weird quirk where I love to watch TV shows alongside TV rewatch podcasts, where like every single episode, I will watch the episode of the TV show and then I will go and listen to people talk about it for 2 hours.
What's up, Recovering Gleek?
I was going to say, no wonder we love Recovering Gleek. And I did that with Avatar when I rewatched it last year.
I didn't know that.
And so this podcast I was listening to, the whole group, all the different podcasters, they were talking about like, oh, these are the nations I would feel most aligned to and all this stuff. So I was obviously kind of like, quote unquote, typing myself along with them and like, okay, which element do I align with? I had a very hard time. I think air is where I landed. I love the philosophy of the air nomads and the way that like they're, I think, very free spirited. I was actually rewatching the episode where they discover the group of refugees that has taken over the Northern Air Temple. And Aang at first is really upset. He's like, this is like my history. This is my culture. But then he comes to see that like a hermit crab, this was a shell that was empty and these people made it their new home. And they also have the spirit of the airbenders, even if they don't have the power of the airbenders. And I think that like the sense of spirit. There's a lot of spirituality, I think, to the Airbender philosophy. And also, I've always said that if I had a superpower, I would want it to be flight. So that's definitely part of it too. But for me personally, I think I'm an Airbender. What about you?
That's so funny. Well, I was gonna say my brothers both fight over being Airbender because there's 4 of us siblings, and the boys fight constantly over who would be air. They like both want to be it, and it's interesting because but it's so funny because like the other 3 always change. I've always been water, like water till I die. Like I am a proud water tribe gal, southern or northern, not sure which one, but I find so much peace by the water, and I've always loved swimming, and I love like everything about the water. So it's not even, I don't even know if it's like a personality thing. It's just like an actual like attraction to the element. And I just like know that like if we ever evolve to be able to like be part of it, that one's gonna be mine. So like, I'm just so sure.
I also think with waterbending, it's the easiest one to like pretend to have as a kid. Like, even though I'm like, oh, I'm an airbender, like I cannot be in a pool. And especially as a kid, I could not like be in a pool without trying to like bend the water and you like push it and make waves and stuff. Like I feel like that's the easiest one to like bend in real life. So
I love like the healing. I love the like I love that it's both healing and blood bending are like created.
Yeah.
And this is as good a time as any just to say like we might brush on Korra, but this is really like contained to the Avatar: The Last Airbender. So I'm actually not gonna, in my typing, I didn't consider anything we find out about the characters later on in Legend of Korra. So I'm just keeping it contained. And we kind of talked about that before, but just wanted to like put that out there that if you're like, well, yeah, but then when he's older, and we are also like negating the rule that you're not your like full Enneagram until you're an adult.
Yes,
Let's just like be in the moment here. So
no Korra spoilers, but also, yes, I was thinking about that because especially Aang, he is 12 years old. So like, if you know a 12-year-old in your life that you really care about, please don't type them. Please don't ask them to type themselves. Like, give them time to grow into the fullness of their personality. These are fictional characters. We only type fictional characters.
Exactly. We couldn't say it enough. Well, perfect. Well, let us dive in. And why don't you tell us who Aang is, since we're talking about him already?
Yeah. Let's crack open the iceberg. The boy in the iceberg.
That was good.
Aang is the Avatar. He is also the last Airbender. Gee, I wonder where they got that title from. And 100 years before the events of the main series, the Fire Lord Ozai, I think it's Ozai, it might be his dad at that point, but the Fire Nation starts a crusade and starts a war to conquer the rest of the world. And Fire Lord Roku, is that his name? Because that's also the TV. And now I'm like tripping myself out. I could have sworn it was Roku, but now
I think Roku also might be the firebender who was the Avatar. Roku was the Fire Nation born Avatar. Yeah.
Yes. So Avatar Roku dies, and the Avatar cycle, he is reincarnated as Aang, the Airbender, because the Fire Nation is aware that the next Avatar will be born an Airbender. They lead a genocide against all of the air temples and try to find and kill the new Avatar before the Avatar is powerful enough to overthrow the Fire Nation. It's a tragedy. And at this point, Aang is 12 years old. He has just found out that he is the Avatar. You're normally not supposed to find out until you're 16. And in the midst of this giant storm in the fight, he actually runs away. And in this giant storm, he gets lost and goes into the Avatar state of self-preservation. And he and his loyal flying bison, Appa, are trapped underwater, like contained in stasis for 100 years. And that is when he is then found by brother and sister, Sokka and Katara. And when they break him out of the iceberg, even though it takes him a second to adjust to the fact that it's been 100 years, he is just go, go, go. He wants to go penguin sledding, and he wants to ride koi fish, and he wants to ride the unagi and just do travel the world, see all these different things. They're supposed to be going to the North Pole, but Aang has a tendency to get sidetracked and see something fun that he wants to do instead. And he also, I think we see a lot of similarities between him and someone like Katniss or even Harry Potter. These expectations that get put on the shoulders of these children, and you see them struggle with those expectations. He's like, I just want to be a kid. For all my Buffy fans out there, I feel like it's very like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where he doesn't get to have this childhood because he has this destiny instead. And so I think that puts him in a really hard place a lot of the time. And Aang really grows into a leader by the end of the series. And something I think that's really interesting about him, he knows that his destiny is to fight Fire Lord Ozai and to defeat him, but he does not want to kill him. And in the third season, he gets into this really deep inner conflict about like, how can I stop him without killing him? He's not going to be afraid to kill me. Like, he at his heart, I think, is a pacifist, and he doesn't know how to reconcile his duty with his personal and moral convictions. So I think just overall, like, a really upstanding person, but also so much fun, like just a big heart. And as any airbender, he is just light and free and going, he's a leaf on the wind.
Absolutely. I love him too. He is such a great character, and he has so much character for a 12-year-old. I just adore him. Well, I feel like you always say this after I give my description. You're like, oh, I feel like we have different numbers, and I'm going to say it this time. I feel like we might have different numbers.
Oh, no.
So one of the things I wrote about Aang is that one of the things I noticed is how passionate he is about keeping the peace. And so I'm going to do that thing where I do the wing, and I don't normally love to do this, but I think he is a beautiful 9-wing 8 because he is so conflicted over what the role of the Avatar is to be, because he does not want to fight Fire Lord Ozai. He does not want to kill him, and he is so conflicted about all of this. He's a vegetarian his whole life, and he loves going to places and bringing joy and peace. And like the reason why he was in a storm and he got caught up and he was frozen for so many years is because he was told he was the Avatar, and he was like, this is way too much responsibility. I think he had some inner conflict on this, and he ran from it. I think he's honestly, for a 12-year-old especially, really in a great place in his health. He wants to run and flee from conflict. He has a really beautiful dedication to his friends and what he thinks is right, which I think is that 8 there as well. It might be a 1. I don't know. I'm up for debate, but I think it's like, I do see that fire in him and what he thinks is right and wants to do. I just convinced myself he's a 9-wing 1. Excellent. Sorry, everyone. But I just think of the 2 times he runs away because he's like, this is what's right. And he's also running from conflict, but running to what he thinks is the right thing to do. And I think he is just a very conflicted individual, but he wouldn't wish that on his worst enemy. I think of like, when he sees Boomy for the first time, and how he's trying to outsmart the traps instead of fight his way through them. And I'm like, what a 9, what a beautiful like peacemaker. Like he is, and that is what he wants the role of the Avatar to mean to him, rather than like the biggest and the greatest like we have seen in years before. And to the point where he's like about to fight Fire Lord Ozai, and he knows he's going to have to kill him. And he's talking to all the avatars of the past, and they're all like, dude, you got to kill him. Like, dude. And he's like, I have like signed to peace and pacifism my whole life. Like, how am I going to do this? And so I also could see a little bit of 7 in him, but I think it's like the culture of the air nomads to be 7s, like you know what I mean? Okay. I think it's like a 7 culture, but he is a 9 among, like in a culture that we might see as 7s.
I cannot believe you just said that, because That was exactly what I was going to say about the 9. Like, he's a vegetarian and he's a pacifist because he was raised in a culture of vegetarianism and pacifism. Like, he's like, that is literally the culture that he was born into and raised with. And like, he holds those values very deeply to his heart. I don't want to like discredit what you're saying. Like, I think you have a good argument for the 9, but yes, I do think he's a type 7. And I think that like he is an avoider in the way that he literally spends so much of the first part of the season, of the very beginning of the series even, with this goal. He's like, Katara, okay, we're going to learn waterbending. We're going to go to the Northern Water Tribe and we're going to learn waterbending. And then every single episode, he is like, wait, first we have to go do this fun thing. First we have to do this fun thing. The only reason he ends up reuniting with Boomy is because when they were kids and best friends, they went to the city of Omashu and rode the delivery carts as the world's greatest slides. And the only reason he takes Katara and Sokka to Omashu are to ride the world's greatest slides. Like, I think we see him reach a point. He is like bouncing from high energy thing to high energy thing because he doesn't want to acknowledge the grief that he is feeling about the loss of his people. And it kind of all comes down all at once and he gets lost in the Avatar state and Katara has to like bring him back. But I think that it's his avoidance strategy to like run to the most high energy, like fun thing that he can find in the way of a type 7, I think.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. This is one of the tricky things. I think your sentence does make sense about him being a 7 and 9 world more than maybe the 9 and the 7 world. It's just tricky because I'm like, he is a child. And so like, yes. I think that is a huge reason why we can't type children is like, That's 9 in general runs away from conflict. And a 9 might do that in adulthood by procrastinating or like, I don't know, in like 2020, just like being on, or 2021, Instagram, Facebook, like just drowning themselves in information. But a kid almost always would probably choose those fun things. So I think like it's hard to discern the difference between a 7 and a 9 because both of them like avoid conflict and one's conflict and one is hard and emotional feelings, and Aang has both. So I'm definitely willing to give you 7. Yeah. Give me wing 8 and just say that those things are conflicting because I think that was kind of part of it for me.
That's interesting.
Oh, because he is.
I didn't necessarily
loyal and anxious.
I didn't necessarily see the wing 8 in the 9 or the 7. Like I don't see a ton of 8 in him. I saw a 7 wing 6 personally, like in those friendships with Boomy, with Katara. Like he is immediately ready to travel the world with these people. And he met them like 2 days ago. And I think even just the way that and this could be 9 too. This may be 9 instead of 6. But I love the way that as time goes on, like he is just always adding people to this merry band of misfits. Like whether it be Toph is welcome to, and like he, I think is the glue of that group in a lot of ways. But like I said, I could see that as a 7 wing 6 or as a core type 9. I don't actually see the 8 in him really at all. Cause I think that conflict is his destiny, but that's something that's like put on him. So like, you know how Thor, I don't know why I'm like all the way back in episode 3.
You always go back to Thor.
I always go back to Thor, but like, Thor has like these pressures from his dad and from like the royal family to like be this great warrior, but that's not necessarily, I think, what Thor wants to do on his own. I think when Aang's like, I don't want to fight, but I have to, he has to because of like his duty as the Avatar more so than I think an innate like need to fight, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think. Oh, definitely. I think it's just like he does have it's almost more one because I think he does have like what's right and what's wrong very clearly to himself. But I think I can go with 7. I think this wing 6 is a good point too. And just like how stressed he gets. And like the thing that's interesting is I don't feel like they ever, unless you're an adult, you don't really see the theme of the hardship that he goes, like he lost his entire people. And even especially as an adult watching, I'm like, they never touch on that. Like we see it when he loses Appa and like how unhinged he becomes and just like emotional and like cannot make it through anything. He needs Appa because Appa's the one thing from his past. And then a little bit, like you said, when they're like the rehabilitated air nomads that are not air nomads in the air temple. You don't really see him like talk about it. And I think it might have been a little too mature to technically be for a kid's show.
For sure.
But it was interesting to me. And I think like had we have more of that information, the discussion might be a little bit more full. But since we don't, like I think we're in a good spot. Like I think
yeah, I totally agree. And I almost think that that's a byproduct of, you're totally right. I think it was like too dark. The creators of this show had to work really hard with Nickelodeon to like tell the story that they wanted to tell.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if it had gotten too adult, they couldn't have. So I think they almost built that into Aang's character as somebody who doesn't want to look at the really hard emotions and won't unless he absolutely has to. And so even though it's probably a byproduct of some of the narrative tools and the fact of when it was being broadcast and where it was being broadcast, it may not have been that in the original draft, but I do think that in the finished product, it actually lends more credence to me seeing him as a 7. Before we move on, though, I'm kind of surprised neither of us, like, there's a number that did not enter the conversation that I kind of thought might pop up.
What is it? I don't know.
Kind of wondered about the type 4 just a little bit. He is so sunny and cheerful, and he does run away from those big feelings, but he's also the only one of his kind and like is always searching for somebody else to understand him. Like, in similar, you were talking about like losing Appa or like finding the Northern Air Temple. It was in that episode where he was like, he was so excited to see his people again, and then there was nobody there that actually understood him, and he really struggled with that at first. And again, I think that's just a product of like his environment and the circumstances.
Exactly.
But almost like metaphorically, I can see a 4 relating to that, even if Aang, I don't think is like a 4. Does that make sense?
I think like a 4, again, like he's a child. I think like if he were an adult, we might have seen the 4 come out in him. But like, I also think like he doesn't feel the big emotions most of the time. And like the one time he does when he's like releasing his chakras and that's why I think he's a 7, because it's like he doesn't sit in the big emotions. Otherwise I would think he's a 4. And I think like, honestly, for how like actually insane it is that he's the last one left of his people, he seems to not care. He finds belonging in other people very well. So I don't see him as a 4. Like he doesn't seem to be like, point. I'm an outsider, or even like if other people say he's an avatar all the time, he doesn't really say he's the avatar that like I always am like, guys, people are out to kill you. Like probably don't say it as much everybody, but like, he doesn't bring it up, and like he doesn't really seem to care. And I don't think he has that like secret longing to be normal that a lot of 4s have, or the secret pride and being different that 4s have. So like it didn't even cross my radar, because I'm like, yes, he's unique, but it's so far from like his character, because like he uses the fact that he's unique to bring others like Toph, and even like I think in how he's even like willing to accept Zuko and like not everybody else is. It's kind of a big deal. Like, and I just really appreciate him. So I would say he's not a 4. And that's why it didn't even cross my radar. But I think it's a good point. Like, again, just to the fact that he is a kid, and like, had he had been an adult, we could have seen which one of these circumstances, which one of these circumstances affected him the most. And then we could have like maybe even considered it. But at the moment, I'm like, he's not really dealing with it.
Totally. Okay. Who's next?
Katara, my homegirl, my soulmate. I love her. I was, especially as a child, always like the only girl in a world of men and little boys, actually. And so like I like loved her. I was obsessed with her. And I am also the Water Tribe. So Katara is the one who, she is the last waterbender of her tribe, and she is trying to teach herself waterbending, and it is very challenging. And we later find out, why it's a little hush hush, don't do it as much, because they were purposely sought out and executed by the Fire Nation. And so she's the only waterbender, and she loves like all the old traditional stories of hope in the Avatar. And so when she and her brother Sokka find him, she's like, this is amazing, this is great. And she's like, we're gonna go on a journey and we're gonna defeat the firebenders tomorrow. and you're going to teach me how to waterbend. I'm going to teach you how to we're going to all waterbend together. It is actually, I feel like it's interesting because like at the beginning, it's very much like she has hope he'll teach her how to waterbend. And then like as soon as they go to the Northern Water Tribe, they're like, you're actually really good. And she's like a raging feminist. She's like, excuse me, I'm going to learn how to waterbend. I'm not just going to learn how to heal people. Like I can do both and you can do both. Like it's just like, she's very like passionate and I love her. And she's, I think like, I don't believe in calling young girls bossy, but she's a little bit like she is very much a leader. And I do kind of love the thing about what I kind of peg them also as a golden trio. Like they do take times each being the leader and figuring out their strengths. And I think like the writers did such a good job being like, we'll get there in a second, but like it showing each one of their talents, even when they're like untraditional. So that's Katara. She's a sister of Sokka. She's kind of like 1/3 of the golden trio that we are with throughout the series. And like, obviously Aang's the main character, but I also think a lot of the story is told from Katara's point of view. Like she's definitely like the protagonist in some episodes. So I love her, our water tribe queen. And she is so persistent, so like fight to the death and like has more faith and hope than anyone else in the series. And I think that's really beautiful. So tell me.
100% agree. I love Katara. And I say this with all the love because you mentioned it too. But the first word I have written down under the number that I gave her was bossy. And like, again, I love Katara. But I think as the series goes on and we add Toph to the group and we kind of have a 4-person group, Toph and Katara really throw each other into stark contrast. And I think compared to Toph, Katara like appears more bossy. Like she really tries to take a motherly role. And that's also because of the lack of a mother figure in their lives. Like she has had to be the mother for herself and Sokka for so long. I will cut to the chase. I think she's a 1, wing 2. I hate to throw the wing in there right away too, but she is principled. She is an idealist. She's an optimist in a lot of ways. She sees the ways that the world can be, and she has faith and hope that the world is gonna be a better place someday. She like has to like rush in and save the world, and like you were talking about with the Northern Water Tribe, with Master Paku, when he says like, we do not train girls to fight. You can go learn how to heal. She refuses. She finds she's like, Aang, you're going to teach me at night. Like she duels him and they say like, Katara, you're going to lose. And she says, I know. But she has to stand up for the principle of the thing. And like the principled idealist, like right and wrong is very like, screams very type 1 to me. And then I think she also has that wing 2. The episode that really made me think about the wing 2 was all the way in season 3. We have an episode called The Painted Lady, and they find this fishing town and they're on this river, but they've lost all of their livelihood because the Fire Nation has polluted all of their water with this giant factory that is making all of the metal for the Fire Nation army. And she sneaks out every night that they're there, and she like puts on this costume as the spirit of the Painted Lady, and she starts to help this village without their knowledge. She doesn't tell the rest of the group, but she sees this thing that she has to fix, and she's like, I'm going to go in and I'm going to fix this right now. Like, I know how to do this the right way. And it leads to some like negative consequences. She messes up and Aang has to come in and help her. But I think she's just like, I see the right way to do things and I need to go do it. Like but she also has that slant towards helping people that I think is the wing 2. So that's sometimes more than we give right away, but I do think she's one.
No, but sometimes it's necessary. I thought she was a 2. Okay. I like the idea of her not necessarily being a 2. I kind of, especially I'm thinking, so I'll talk about what I thought first. Okay. So I thought she was a 2. I also thought about the Painted Lady and like her going into this town and like not being able to leave because she wants to, like she needs to help and she knows she can do it. And like the whole thing with Aang is like he needs her help, and like she is the motherly figure. They lost their mother very young, and she wants to be that, and she chooses to do that. But I love the 1. I actually think that's correct. Like I think
Thank you.
Because the thing is too, like she becomes the painted lady because she doesn't know, she knows helping people is the right thing to do. And like, she has to do it. And so I think she's like that one with the wing too as well. I'm also just thinking of, so one of the things that's like cool about Katara is like, she can see what is right though. Like she's also the planner of the group. Like she is planning what we're going to do next, why we need to do it, and gets like kind of frustrated when they move off task, which is such a one, like they are the schedulers, they are the planners. And just knowing what is right versus what is wrong. And I mean, she was ahead of herself often. And she also has that compassion that the twos have. Like I think of her and Zuko again, when like they're talking about their mothers and she has that empathy for him and she like sees him. And I just am like, oh, beautiful moment. Like, because she has that compassion, but she also knows what he's doing is wrong, and like is one of the ones that like will not trust him again. So like, she's just like, I do think like one is exactly what she is. I just did not think about that at all. I was thinking like, oh yeah, she's such a two, and I think she just like. I do think her relationship with Toph though, and that like leadership, like butting heads.
Right.
It shows a lot of the one, especially because like Toph is not a real follower at all. And Katara so ardently is. Like when Toph comes and doesn't follow the rules, everyone's like, ladies, stop fighting. And they're like, ugh.
Yes.
I think
yes,
it's
exactly.
Really yeah.
And I think even Katara, though she is a rule follower, when they find that waterbending scroll and she like steals it, and early on, like because she knows that like she has this higher this higher order of like what is right and wrong, and like her number one priority and like the number one thing she has to get done is learn how to waterbend, like help save the world. Like she's willing to like bend the rules to fit her like moral compass when she needs to as well. But also Katara and Zuko, I don't know about you, but they should have ended up together. Like
I feel similarly. I don't think Aang and Katara, I think they were just too young to be in love. Yeah.
And there was no development really, I don't feel like.
It was just like, just so you know, in this episode, we're going to sprinkle it in. You know what I mean? I would not have hated it if they ended up together. I did kind of like May. Like, I hated to love her. Zuko, we'll get there. But like, I did kind of like that. But I don't know. I thought it would have been nice of them to end up together, but they didn't. It's very similar to how I feel about Star Wars. And since that's not the episode we're talking about, I'm not going to spoil anything. But if you, and I'm leaving it up to the universe because there's a lot of Star Wars content, but I feel people will know what I mean. But I was going to say the other thing that made me think she was a 2 that I think would be interesting for us to talk about is the hard feelings and emotional hardship she feels towards her father. I think that is very indicative of type 2 being like, this is what I would do for you. This is what I want you to do for me. And like her father left to fight the war and they haven't found him and they haven't seen him and their mother left. And she has a grudge against him for a very long time when they first see him again. Like the whole time Aang is asleep where he grows all his hair back. I mean, it's like a couple months. I don't know how long. And they have a heart to heart and he's like explains it to her. But I think like I see that and that reminds me of it too. I think that's like such a struggle a 2 would have. It'd be like, I would never leave you. I can't believe you left me. And I think also it's very valid. Like she's a kid. And like
totally.
They felt very orphaned, and Sokka is like right in right away, but she is not. So that's the one thing I thought that she might be a 2 with a wing 1 versus a 1 with a wing 2. Because I also don't really see that inner critic, but I do see the rule following to like a T.
If I'm thinking about like where that might point to a 1, it reminds me as well. I was going to say this about Zuko after they do talk about their mothers, and then he does betray them with Azula and everything at the end of book 2. She has a really hard time forgiving Zuko because he betrayed her. Like she is like, I think there's a level of like what you did was wrong. And it hurt. And there's a level, I think, of like hard and fast rule following and like betrayal, I think being really key to or really aggravating to a type 1. And I think in the same way she sees, if not betrayal, there is this level of like, you did the wrong thing, and I will hold that grudge because I am in pain. I was in pain, and like there was a right way and a wrong way to handle this, and you chose the wrong way. I totally think that's a great point about the type 2, though, just in terms of like the reciprocity that I think is really key to a type 2. Like, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. And so that's interesting. But I think I see that need to like be right and the need to like do the right thing and live the right way more than I see the need to be needed.
Okay. I think personally. You're right. No, you're right. I think that makes sense. That's just where my head was at coming into the episode. So no, that's a great point. It's a good example. Thank you. Well, this is my favorite character, actually. I might have said that about Katara, but I didn't mean it. Yeah, I love Sokka. Oops, spoiler alert, he's going to be talking about Sokka now.
Yes, Sokka, the older brother, the man of the village at the very beginning, because all of the older men have gone off to war. And I mean, I did rewatch a lot of the early season and then some of the like middle and later stuff too for this. But in the very first episode, like Sokka is trying to train up all of the children of the village to like learn how to fight, to learn how to be warriors. He takes that responsibility really seriously. And I think he puts a lot of that responsibility on himself to like take care of the village and to live up to the legacy that his dad has left. And like you said, when they do reunite with their dad, Katara has a harder time forgiving him, whereas Sokka is like, he just missed his dad, and he just like is, and he idolizes his dad so much that he like just wants to live up to him, and he's excited to see him again.
I think so. Oh, I love it.
When you were talking about the way that this show like does a good job of highlighting each of the different characters' like strengths, the first person I think of is Sokka, because I think we see him really struggle throughout the series, being the only non-bender who's like a main part of the show for the entire time. And he has the sense, I think, of inadequacy, of powerlessness in comparison to these other people. And I mean, it's not necessarily fair and to just be born with these magic powers or to not be. And Sokka didn't have any control over that. And I think that even though he has his boomerang, we see him like, I'm just Boomerang guy. I think he struggles with like this sense of not being enough a lot. And he is also like, something that really stood out to me about Sokka as I was rewatching is that he is very brave. Like almost like bullheaded, but like he is going to he stands alone against like Zuko's invasion of the Southern Water Tribe in the very first episode, or the first two, when they're looking for Aang. He stands alone and he like does not back down, even though it's a whole army and like an entire military fleet. And he's also, as the show goes on, I think one of the strengths he discovers is his like ingenuity and his like skills for engineering. He helps the inventor at the Northern Air Temple like figure out how hot air balloons work and how to detect the gas leak. Like he has this really nimble brain and like this ability to see things differently from other people. And I think that helps in those skills of kind of engineering and inventing and building that we see develop as the show goes on too.
Absolutely. Well, I was going to say, like, when you were saying how brave he is, I was like, the thing that makes him, I think, the most brave is that he does know the challenge and he is usually quite nervous. Like, he's the one who's like, should we think about this a little bit longer? Like, are you sure? Like, why don't we have a plan? Like, he's always like saying that kind of stuff. And yet he always goes into it. And when you think he's like 16, I think it's like 16, 14, 12. He is so brave and he's like leading these armies and he is doing the thing. And I think he is incredibly brave. So the thing I had him down for, the Enneagram type I had him down for, was a 6 wing 5. Again, I'm doing the wings again. Sorry. Because he is quite anxious, fiercely loyal to the people that he loves, to the water tribe. Like, how many times is he like, what a tribe? Like, he's like, we're here, we're gonna do it. And in his hatred for the Fire Nation, we see how loyal he is to the Water Tribe. I think, because it's like he thinks it's of the opposing team, and that's like what he's going to do. And he is always thinking ahead, and that's like part of his like strategic engineering mind. He is always nervous. He's scared to love again because his first girlfriend turned into the moon. Like, I love him so much. But he's also like not like he's like down to party as soon as he meets her too. So it's like, well, it's a little bit of both. But I think
mean, he did meet Suki before Yue, technically.
That's true.
I love Suki too. Like
I wish we had time for Suki, but she also isn't in a ton of stuff, but like her character is really awesome. Mm-hmm. So I think he's a 6 with a strong wing 5. I just think he kind of has that emotion and that like little ball of like anxiousness and not wanting to lose his people. Like that's like a huge part of his season 3 arc where there's just like Suki and like, I don't want you to leave. I don't want to part with you, even though he knows she can fend for herself. He knows he doesn't have to protect her, but he wants to. And I think he's just really good. And then also just a little more apprehensive with Zuko and like, okay, everyone gets to go on their spirit guide version.
Yes.
A spirit guide journey with Aang, except for me. Like, why are we just trusting this guy? Like, he's very like, because he's loyal. And he's also has, I think that intuitive gut that a lot of them have. And I think it's really great what you said, just like to harp on it. I think he handles being the only one who can't bend in the whole gang by the end so well. And he's learning his sword tricks. And I think like one time he says I'm just the boomerang guy, but he doesn't seem sad. He's like, yep, just the boomerang guy. Like nothing to see here. Like it's kind of a joke. And I think of the library, like I think he's always just like, hey guys, this could go wrong. And he's usually right. So that's why I think he's a 6. I'm interested to hear what you think.
Yes, I think that all makes a lot of sense. Okay. 6 is one of the numbers I had written down, but I had a hard time pinning Sokka down. Like I think at the beginning is kind of like, he copes a lot with humor. So I was like, okay, maybe he's a type 7 too. Like he likes to make a lot of jokes, but you're totally right. He's a planner. He's a worst case scenario kind of person. He is actually the person in season 3 that has this timetable and they're like, Sokka, can we stop here? And he's like, okay, only if we pee twice today instead of 3 times. Like he has this whole like timetable about the summer solstice. However, the number that kept coming out to me as I was going through Sokka's journey, and you're totally right. Like by the end, he's proud of being boomerang guy, but I think that's a journey that he goes on of like self-acceptance. He has got this chip on his shoulder and he has got this thing to prove. And this like also this level of like confidence, and sometimes it's even his bravery that I don't think is like totally earned. It's like, okay, but, and like I said, I was actually just rewatching the episode where he does meet Suki for the first time, and he's very like, he's a little bit of a misogynist when we start the show. He learns, he grows.
Yeah, he does.
We love to see him like acknowledging his mistakes, but he's like, there's no way a group of girls could have beaten us up. Like, and when he meets Suki and he like, he looks down on the Kyoshi warriors because they're not men. And I think he has this sense of almost like entitlement that is stemmed from insecurity and like of having to bear the weight of this responsibility. All of which is to say, I kind of saw some type 3 in him of like the chip on my shoulder. I need to prove, like I need to be the best I can be because he knows he's bearing the weight of responsibility for the village. And so he's going to be the leader. He's like, I'm going to step up. I'm going to lead. I'm going to teach all of these kids how to fight. However, and I had the 6 written down. I wasn't super sure about it, but I love what you have to say about it. And I think you're right. And I think in his, especially I think more at the beginning of the show, in his levels of like stress, he maybe takes on some of the less favorable aspects of the type 3. And that's what I was seeing in some of the like brashness, the bullheadedness, maybe like some cockiness that's actually just him moving along his arrow.
I think there's a lot of 3 slander on this podcast. I just want to clear up there.
I love type 3s. I think we have more type 3s than any other number on this podcast.
We just talk about their negative qualities a lot. Because I feel like I'm always 3s. Like, we do. I just wanted to put it out there.
No, yes, I want you to finish your thought too.
I have a very strong wing 3, and up until recently, I very clearly and strongly believed they were the absolute best parts of who I am. I think now I'm seeing myself as a more holistic person, but I do love my 3. So I understand though. XOXO.
I think even when we started, I remember talking a lot about type 3s and like their charisma and their ability to like make connections and their friendliness and their extroversion. Like, also 3s are powerhouses. Like, do not get me wrong. Like, a 3 will do anything and everything they will set their mind to.
I didn't say this on mic, but Katara actually my originally thought was a 3 wing 2 because like she's such a leader. She's so clear about what she wants to be, but I think like you made a lot of good points for I think she couldn't really charm someone if she tried, because I think she like she's like, why would I do that? Like
right.
Anyway, good.
All of this is to say, to close that loop, I totally see the wing 5 too. Like, I see the wing 5 really clearly. That was actually in my head if he was a type 6 because of that like inventor's brain that he has. And also, speaking of his sword skills at the later part of the season, like I love the episode with the sword master and just like him learning those techniques. I love this show so much. I'm thinking about how the Swordmaster becomes like he's a member of the White Lotus at the end. And
I know. It's honestly so well done. Like so thoughtful and like very well written. And like I think I would love to read the comics one day and just I have read some of them and they're great. Really? Like, I love them. I'm waiting for them to release the 3rd one. There's like 3 that are kind of like direct continuations of the show, as far as I understand. And the 3rd one I think is called The Rift, and I haven't read it yet because I want them to release it all. They call it an omnibus where they put like the multiple chapters together and sell it as one. I'm waiting for them to release that digitally. And then I'm going to read that one too, because as soon as I finished watching the show last year, I was like, I need more. There's a comic all about what happened to Zuko's mother. It's so good. I did read that one. Highly recommend the comics if anybody is a fan of the show and hasn't read them yet. No, I would. Yes. I'm like, I accidentally just want anybody to look at them right now. Whoops. I can wait till we're off mic. Well, Lucas, I'm so excited, and I can't believe next episode is our last one of season 2.
Wow. I think we are saving everybody's favorite. Well, I thought you said Sokka was your favorite character. I think maybe the most complex character in the whole show.
Yes.
Is the one that we're saving for next week, which is Prince Zuko of the Fire Nation, as well as the unlikely besties, one of my favorite pairings in the whole show, which is his uncle Iroh and Toph. Like, I love how they meet each other before. Oh, we'll get into it. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
We'll talk about it next week. Can't wait. Well, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Typecasting. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at TypecastingPod, where you can vote in our weekly polls. Leave a review and be sure to join us next week when we take on more pop culture by the numbers.